The festive period is often a funny time. It starts with being super busy with trying to catch up with everybody and attending parties, because it seems to me, I don't know about you, but in my life, everybody you've ever known wants to catch up in December. However, often as we enter the Christmas period, and in particular the Twixmas, I think they call it, the gap between Christmas and New Year, you've often got the time, opportunity and headspace to think. And I love that opportunity to think. But annoyingly, some reflective but difficult to answer questions often pop in our heads in this time of year. What does the next chapter of my life actually look like? Am I living my best life today? And why might I be doing things I definitely don't enjoy? We talk a lot about making change and positive change in our 50s and 60s. And we know that it's never just about the money. It's about identity and purpose and balance and relationships and health and the practical reality of what we do with our time when we have more choice. And that's why Christmas and the festive period is a really good opportunity to reflect. That's because it's a natural rest and reflect point in the year. A time when the contrast often is sharper between what you're doing now and what you want to be doing. Between how you spend your time now and how you actually want to spend your time. But here's the big thing. Reflection only helps if it leads somewhere. And often when the reflections fade and we get into our January habits and routines that we're used to living our life by, we forget about all those good intentions. That's often partly because change is often really difficult, but also because routine is safe. However, if the way you're spending your life now, you know needs to change, I want to help you change your life to a life you really truly want to live. And I think that comes through often self-reflection. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the 3 questions you should ask yourself and a couple of bonus ones and the process you should follow over the festive period to really embody and empower you to make positive change in your life. Welcome to What Happens Next. Now there's 3 questions inspired by the brilliant work of George Kinder. I think it's worth all of us asking about ourselves when we reach our 50s and 60s. Now, if you want a deeper dive, I'm going to explain the 3 questions as part of this video, but if you want a deeper dive into George's work, I'm going to put a link into the brilliant book he wrote, Life Planning for You, in the comments below. It's definitely worth reading if you're thinking about making positive change in your life, and certainly it's really helped me. But George has a framework of 3 questions that I'm going to put my own spin on and explain why. Asking yourself these questions and reflecting on the answers might just empower you to get closer to the life you want today. And in this video, I want to explain why these 3 questions will, instead of you carrying on with a life you're comfortable with, but actually not entirely happy with, help you get closer to the life you actually want to live. And question number 1 is, if money was no longer a factor, what would you do with your time? If the pressure eased and you didn't have to justify your days financially, how would you choose to spend the most finite and limited and valuable, I'd argue, resource you've got? Time. Now this question matters because often when we're thinking about the decisions we make, our fears, doubts and worries about money often stop us living the lives we want to. Even when we're financially secure on paper, and I've seen this with clients over 20 years of working with them as a chartered financial planner, our relationship with money, the stories we tell ourselves about money, often dictate our choices. We often ask ourselves what feels responsible, what would other people do, what's indulgent. But here's the thing, money stories are simply that, stories we tell ourselves. And if they're only stories, we've got the ability to change them. There's also a subtle well-being trap this question helps you avoid, because Actually, I've got clients who have got to a point where they've got enough, but still want to accumulate more. And if that makes you happy, great. But if success has been defined as accumulation, that's the story you tell yourself about money, and you're finding you're swapping your valuable resource of time instead of doing the stuff you really enjoy with the people you love and like, I'd suggest you need to explore that as a concept. Because what you can do is end up continuing to chase more at the expense of everything else. There's always a trade-off. And here's the interesting thing. Research consistently finds is if you're only focused on materialism, just buying more stuff and accumulating more wealth, that's often associated with lower personal well-being on average. The research is nuanced on that, but there's a clear link between materialism and a sole focus on that and lower levels of well-being. Christmas is a really good moment for this question because the season is already teaching you something about time. Look at what you naturally gravitate towards when the festive season starts. Because I think it's an opportunity to look at how you would spend your time if you wasn't simply going to earn more money. Do you feel best after a long walk or a pub lunch or a day of quiet reading? Or a balance of those, because I like all of those, but interestingly, I'd want a balance. Do you come alive hosting, cooking and connecting? Or do you actually get energy from recharging alone? Do you feel the most you when you're learning, building, making, mentoring, planning a trip, volunteering or exploring an idea? Asking all of these reflective questions will give you an insight into how you might spend your time. And it's interesting because often we might say we want one thing, but actually behave in one way. And I find that often our real intentions are hiding in our behaviour, not our intentions. However, I'm also a massive fan of looking at low-cost, rapid experimentation. Because what that does is allows you to try things that might give you a better answer to the question we've already asked. Now, when it comes to if money was no object, how will we spend our time? There's two super simple ideas that we can think about that might help us give an answer. First is a time diary. For 7 days, maybe over the Christmas period, but maybe when you're back to your usual routine in January, track where your time actually goes, just roughly. Then sit down and decide how much time you've spent on something, what is giving you joy, what is giving you satisfaction, what's not but you're spending inordinate amounts of time doing, and how to get that balance right. Often clarity in a financial plan or how we spend our time allows us to engineer and focus towards something differently. So just simply keeping note of how you spend your time over a 7-day period might be a great start for 10. Or spend some time thinking about this question. And I'd recommend you get a pad and a paper or open up a Word document and answer this question today. There's 3 parts. How would you spend your ideal day? If you have 1 day left to spend it ideally, how would you spend it? How would you spend your ideal week? And how would you spend your ideal month? My last low-cost incremental exercise is thinking about something you loved to do as a kid. I'm a bit of a geek, so I loved computer games as a kid. And one of the favourite things that I've done recently is take my 14-year-old daughter to a retro arcade and play Pac-Man and Street Fighter and all the old-style arcade games. Now, for you, this might be music, it might be model making, it might be sport, drawing, tinkering. And I'd suggest that it might be worth you thinking about how you reintroduce the thing you loved to do as a kid simply for 1 hour a week. I'd love for you to try these experiments, and so I understand what the outcome of those experiments are for you, feel free to leave a note in the comments. Question 2 is, if you had a limited amount of time left on the earth, let's say 3 years, your health was going to be perfect, what would you choose to spend your time on and what would matter most? This question works, I believe, because it forces you to think about trade-offs. It collapses the fantasy that we've all got unlimited amounts of time and stops us thinking about everything as later. It allows us to sharpen our priorities because we do know time is finite. We don't feel it day to day. So the idea of thinking about this question is it gives us a specific horizon and focus the mind on what's really important. If you watch any of the What Happens Next videos, you know one of my favourite concepts is memento mori. In short, remembering death as a way to clarify what we want to do in life. And how thinking about the fact that our time on the planet is finite can put our minor fears into perspective. Now, the goal here when we're thinking about death isn't to become morbid, it's to actually become honest with ourselves. Because in my experience, many people, especially high achievers, don't need more motivation, they need permission to put their priorities in a slightly different order. Often the festive period, and in particular Christmas, you get to spend more time with the people you love and reflect on this. But often, if you're a similar age to me or slightly older, you see your parents aging. You see kids get older and not need you as much anymore. You notice who isn't at the table anymore. For me, it's my mum. We lost her in 2019 and we miss her every year. But often Christmas is a time to reflect on how much we loved her and how grateful for the time we did have in our lives. Now, typically, when I'm thinking about this question, 4 typical things spring to mind. The first one is relationships. Anybody who's looked at any of the What Happens Next work will probably have noticed that we're really big fans of Bob Waldinger's work, and in particular his The Good Life. Because what Robert Waldinger says, based on the assessments of people living 80 years of their lives in the US and looking at what actually makes them happy over that time period, comes up with a startling but short conclusion. The quality of our relationships often determine the quality of our lives. So, if you only had 3 years left on the planet, what relationships would you prioritise? Who would you forgive, which is a really interesting question, and who would you show up for more consistently? Who would you build a deeper relationship with? Secondly, health. I've had clients, friends, colleagues, family members find themselves focusing more on their health after a little scare. So the big question is, if you did have a significant health scare today, what habit would you take to improve your health? But also, what would you change about your life non-health wise? Thirdly, contribution. We often consider when we've got a limited amount of time left, what we'd give back and what we want our legacy to be. It's worth, even if you're fully fit and with decades to go, asking yourself that question today. And lastly, freedom and curiosity. Where do you want to go sooner rather than later? What do you want to do and see? And what's stopping you doing this now? It's also worth asking a bunch of follow-up questions. What would I do less of immediately if time was short? What conversation would I stop putting off and need to do today? What would I want my ordinary Tuesdays to look like? Not just in the holidays. What would I want to have built by the end of those 3 years? Would it be closer bonds with my family, a community role, a creative body of work, a way of living, or a contribution to charity? Now, there's also, when you're thinking about the next chapter of your life and having a finite amount of time, some questions and some low-cost experiments you could do today to get you close to that goal. Firstly, schedule one recurring connection. I know I had a conversation with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago who said to me, I love spending time with you, Chris, and I love spending time with him, but we need to make more of an effort to stay in touch. And he's absolutely right. What thing can you do on a recurring basis that means that you're seeing the people you love and like? Now, often I see a lot of people I love and like because I play paddle with them, but that doesn't need to be the case. You could arrange a monthly breakfast, you could do a walking meetup, you could do a book club, anything around that that means that you're proactively taking effort to stay in touch with people you love and like on a regular basis is really important. The actual thing you do doesn't matter. What matters is making sure you've got something regular in the diary to connect to that person you love and like. Also, whilst we know that Christmas dinner can be stressful, sitting down, eating and chatting is one of the best ways we can connect. So instead of just getting the people you love and like together for Christmas, the question to ask yourself, is it worth setting up a regular dinner where you get to see people you really like January, February, March and for the rest of the year, not just for a treat in December? Question number 3 is, if you only had 24 hours left, what would you regret not doing? The power of asking what you'd regret at the end of your life gives you the ability, whilst you're still around, to act and to actually mitigate those regrets. That's important because regret is a way of cutting through the shoulds and showing what's really important of us. Often asking these questions of ourselves reveals the apology we owe somebody else but feel too proud to do. The relationships you've neglected that you'd love to rebuild. The courage to do something you really want to do but you keep on putting off. The contribution to a community you want to make or a charity you want to make. And the kindness you need to show yourself or others. I think an amazing prompt, and I'd get a pen and paper and write the answer to this yourself, would be, if I didn't get another year on this planet, I'd regret, and then 3 dots. And then just free write what you'd regret. Then take the regrets you've got on there, convert those into actual actionable steps. If you think you'd regret not seeing your dad more, you can action taking more effort by inviting your dad out for a breakfast more often. If you think you'd regret not being healthier, you can actually request of yourself and take action to do 2 walks a week and share it with a friend to keep you accountable. And if you'd regret not using your life to do good for others, maybe you can take on mentoring one person the next quarter. So there are 3 questions. They're about regret, they're about time as our most valuable commodity, and they're about making sure that we use money as a tool instead of some of the really weird and frankly unhelpful stories we often all tell ourselves about money. However, my experience tells me that those questions will give you an insight, but often an insight isn't enough. What you might need is a spark and a structure. In the What Happens Next book, which is, funny enough, coming out very soon, the book's gone to the publishers. And actually, if you'd like to be on the waiting list for the book, feel free to click on the links below. Or if you're watching this on the TV on your phone, click on the QR code. I write about this simple framework called NEXT. That's navigate, work out where you want to go in life. Evaluate, work out where you are now. Execute, take small incremental steps towards what you want to achieve. Number 4 is track. Keep on track, but also if your goals and targets change, make sure you don't veer off course, still going for the thing that used to be important but isn't anymore. Navigate, evaluate, execute, track, and continue that journey so that consistently you're looking forward to the life you want to live in the next chapter. For example, if you're navigating, you might do this over Christmas week, and I'd suggest you start with one sentence. In 2026, I want a life that feels more like this, whatever that is for you, and less like this. I'd also suggest you look at the 3 priorities you want to achieve in 2026, 1 regret you've got that you'd like to take action to avoid, and 1 money off the table desire. So all of these things allow you to think about the stories you tell yourself about money, but also where you want to go in 2026. Next, it's about valuation. I'd suggest you do a kind, honest inventory in the following areas of well-being. Social well-being. How strong are my social bonds? Purpose and meaning. How clear are my values and how aligned is the action I take every day to the way I live my life? Physical well-being. Am I fit, able, flexible and strong enough to live the life I want? Am I eating and sleeping well? Intellectual and occupational well-being. Do I do work I love? Bear in mind this work might be voluntary, it still counts. This is about finding work that really gives you purpose, meaning, values and enjoyment. Community well-being. How do I support communities that I care about? And financial well-being. Do I have my number that helps me understand how much is enough? Do I tell myself positive, empowering stories about money? And do I use money as a tool to live the life I want? I'd suggest that in all of these areas, after you've answered that question, you give yourself a score out of 10. And then ask yourself, what's the one tiny incremental improvement in all of these areas of well-being I can just do over the course of the next month? Now, interestingly, you might really struggle, and I know I did, with assigning a score to some of these areas of well-being. However, we've got a quiz on the What Happens Next website you can take for free that allows you to make sure you understand where you are from a wellbeing perspective. Again, link in the notes below. You can find it in the comments and you'll be able to find the links to the quiz. However, if you're watching this on your phone, just simply point the QR code at the screen right now, take a photo and it will take you straight to the quiz. Part 3 is execute. Now we've worked out where we are and where we want to be, we want to take incremental action. And I'd recommend simply in the month of January taking one rapid low-cost experiment and only doing one a month. That might be sharing a meal with a person you love or like more regularly, or inviting a friend to lunch, or trying out volunteering. And then you keep track of how that made you feel with 4 simple questions. Number 1, did the thing that I'm doing give me energy? Number 2, did the things that I'm doing, what things that I'm doing drain me? Number 3, what did I learn about myself through going through that experience? And number 4, what's the next tiny experimental adjustment I want to make in my life? And then the journey continues. You navigate again, evaluate again, take small incremental experimental action again, and then review and keep track. That process is cyclical because at no point in life are we static. So there's the questions I think you should ask yourself and the actions you can take with the next framework to help you work out the next chapter of your life. If you're looking for a bit more, here's 2 other videos I'd recommend you watch. In this video, I talk about the 7 mini adventures you can take to work out what happens next that might inspire you. And in this video, I interview a lovely fella called Alex, whose insights are super useful if you're thinking about the next stage of your life. Thank you, Merry Christmas, have a lovely day, and we'll see you on the channel soon.